He began the evening with 500 grand in front of him. He's stuck over 130,000 and he folds. Ike, king 9.
Ike's looking like he wants to keep that pre-flop pressure on.
He does, raising to 1,500. Mercier folds. Phil calls with ace-jack. The cannon's out. Antonio folds.
Hellmuth's a pretty sizable favorite here.
The flop. 10-jack tray. Hellmuth flops top pair.
Hellmuth's way out in front. Let's see if Ike continues.
Action on Ike, who has a gut shot straight draw.
He's also got one overcard to Phil's pair.
Makes it 6,000 to go.
6,000.
How much is out there?
Phil wringing his hands like a cartoon villain. I think he likes his top pair despite the overbet from Issac Haxton.
How much can he bet, dealer?
No limit.
No limit post-flop, Phil.
Shoot. Oh, jeez. Didn't want to call that much.
We're pot limit pre-flop and no limit post-flop. Phil's thinking about how he's got a red carpet later with Evander Holyfield and Daughtry.
7 of hearts on the turn.
Ike's now picked up a double gutter ball. An 8 or a queen would make him a straight.
He bets 15,000.
Ike's decided to semi-bluff here, knowing Phil could have called the flop with something as weak as ace-high.
Phil calls.
Phil decides he's probably not beat in this spot.
I'm not sure if that's true. I'm not sure if Phil decides he's probably not beat. He might just decide this is too good of a part of my range to fold here, but it's not exactly a wonderful spot when Ike is sizing it like this.
Ike sizing is really surprising and unusual for sure. On the flop, he bets 1.5 times the pot. Just not something you see. When you see it, it's usually by an amateur trying to get value from their very strong hands, or by a pro trying to get value for their very strong hands from an amateur. Right? On the flop specifically.
Yeah, but in a way, this is similar. Not to say that one's a pro and one's an amateur. These are both pros, obviously.
Yeah.
But Ike is doing a player-specific thing. At least that's what we think.
Seems like
we think that Ike knows Phil's thought process when it comes to having a big hand. And this is a draw-heavy board. So Ike's saying to Phil, hey, buddy, get your draw out of my pot, which he thinks Phil would say if Phil had a big hand in this spot.
Right. Ike himself probably wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
This bet does accomplish some things. It does certainly fold out some better hands for sure.
Oh,
Right?
then King 9? Yeah.
Of course. It folds out ace highs. It folds out pretty much every pocket pair below a 10 also, right? It just kind of has to.
It folds out the majority of Phil's range, and that's good. That's what Ike's trying to do.
Yeah.
It's just a very interesting way to go about it, to bet 150% of the pot. And already on the flop, Ike is beginning to be polarized. It already is somewhat uncomfortable for ace-jack, even though Phil certainly has to call the flop.
It'd be really weird for Ike to bet, for example, ace 10 this much money on the flop, this percentage of the pot, even though it may seem like, well, what's really the difference?
Yeah.
Then, kings, Phil can have jacks. That's the difference. And
unless maybe Ike had ace 10 of diamonds. Something like that.
Right. That's different, though. That's not just ace 10.
Right,
Now we
of
have
course.
a draw as well, for
Right.
sure.
So we get to the turn, and Ike continues his big sizing. It would have been cool to see if he bet 150% of the pot again. That would have been really interesting,
Really
but that's
cool.
not what happens. And Phil's spot now is just not fun at all. Now, Ike might be playing pretty high variance here, but at least by the turn, he's certainly folding out all of Phil's 10s, unless they have a diamond draw with them.
Agreed. They have to have a diamond draw. Phil might even fold some jacks, by the way. Like if you have queen jack off suit here, which Phil could have called pre-flop and would have called on the flop with, now what are we doing?
I mean, we're not beating any value.
No. We sure aren't. I mean, you could make a similar case with ace jack. You might think as Phil, well, sometimes maybe Ike himself has ace jack.
Yeah.
Maybe. But it feels more like Ike has kings, honestly.
Right. You don't expect Ike to show up with king 9 off. You think if you're ahead with ace jack, Ike has some sort of combo draw, which we're doing okay against on the turn, but we don't love that that's the case. But we certainly have to call just because it's too good of a hand to fold.
It is a really sort of weird spot, but Phil's hand, as Grant said, is just a little bit too good when you think about the range of hands Phil could ever show up with here for value, right? Phil can have the nuts, right?
Yeah.
He could have turned a straight for sure.
Yeah.
He's rarely going to have a set.
He usually raises a set on the flop.
Right, and also those are sometimes pre-flop raises as well, right? So that's a thing. He's can have some overpairs, but not all the time. Sometimes he likes to trap with those pre-flop, but not always. Ace-Jack is one of the very best hands he can show up with here.
Right, so Ike's doing some interesting stuff. He just has run into the buzzsaw that happens to be the top of Phil's range, and that's kind of unfortunate for Ike, because what he's doing is usually going to work.
Indeed.
Deuce of hearts.
Changes nothing. Will Ike barrel?
Nope, he checks.
Looks like Phil's considering a value bet. It's not too scary of a board, but there aren't a lot of hands that will call him here that are worse.
Phil with top pair.
Looks like he's counting out chips anyway.
Bet 16,000.
This is a small bet, less than a third of the pot. Phil's made it as enticing as possible, but Ike still only got king high. I think a call here would be pretty bizarre. I could see Ike making a bluff raise before I see him looking Phil up with king high.
There are several hands I beat.
Not that many. Even if Phil were betting a busted straight or nut flush draw, he'd have Ike beat.
16.
Maybe Ike thinks he's caught Phil with his hand in the cookie jar, which is easy to do when you've got 11 gold bracelets on.
This is going to look rather dumb when I'm wrong.
Calls.
Ace jack.
Ike just lost an arm and a leg, and now he can use that leg to kick himself.
A lot of the time when a player says, I might look stupid, they kind of end up looking a little bit stupid.
Yeah.
It seems like what happened to Ike here, although Ike's a really smart guy. It's hard for that guy to look stupid.
And yet, he might look stupid.
I don't know. We have to dig into it here. Let's
Okay.
find out if he looks stupid.
Let's do it.
All right, but before we get to Ike, let's talk about Phil.
Yeah.
Because this is an interesting decision by Phil on the river to bet. And he bets really small, which is probably better than betting big, but should he bet at all?
What can you get called by? Now, turns out he can get called by king high, no
That's
nothing.
not what
right?
you're expecting,
But
though.
you wouldn't think that
No.
based on the polarization that Ike has done throughout the hand. Ike usually has a very strong hand or a very weak hand. Very strong hand, by the way, could be like two queens or two kings that decides to check here, trying to get value out of the missed draws and things like that. I'm not sure if we can get called by enough stuff because we would never think we could get called by king high here.
No, of course. And obviously, if we get called by two queens or two kings, we lose to that. That's not what we want. So we're looking for value from a pair of some type.
I mean, we have the ace of diamonds in our hands.
Yeah.
Ike doesn't even have the nut flush draw that he went barrel, barrel, and now might be able to call with ace high on. Like,
No.
Ike doesn't have ace king of diamonds or ace queen of diamonds.
Let's think about the one pip worse hand, king jack. Now, it's possible that I could play king jack this way, but I would not expect that to be in his 150% of the pot betting range on the flop. I mean, maybe Ike, because he's such a weird, different player, could do that. But if I'm sitting in Phil's seat, I think Ike is more polarized than that, and king jack isn't really in the range.
I mean, if you're taking king jack out of the range, I don't know how we can make this bet. I'm not sure we can make this bet even if we keep king jack in the range some of the time because there's just not much value there. I'd be worried about Ike folding all his bad hands, raising with all his really strong hands, and calling with his medium strength hands, which might beat us at this point.
Usually do, in fact. Sometimes we're chopping and we're lucky and Ike has ace jack, but it feels like overpairs are a big part of the range that Ike would play this way to the river.
I really thought we were going to get all the way through a video without critiquing a play by Phil Hellmuth.
Oh man, so close.
So close.
So close.
Anyway.
It's not the worst thing in the world, but I don't think it's a good idea to bet. Just there's not that much value to be had theoretically.
It worked out.
But in real life, maybe there is.
Yeah.
Should there be?
Right.
Should there be value here? Should Ike call?
Wow. So I don't think Ike should call.
Doesn't seem likely.
Here's some of the reasons why. Okay, we're obviously losing to any value Phil has. So
Yeah.
we can only beat diamond draws. But there's some diamond draws we're losing to also that Phil may feel the need to bluff on the river.
King, queen of diamonds?
Ace X of diamonds.
Yeah.
Phil might be calling with both of those on the flop and on the turn in position with either the king queen is the monster hand.
Right.
But the ace X of diamonds is strong enough that he might decide to call with that with the overcard, the nut flush draw, all the things. And then feel like he has to bluff the river though when Ike checks. Like take a shot to blow Ike off his whatever hand, his 10 or whatever it might be.
And I know 16K doesn't look that much like a bluff. Most players won't bluff to this size, but Phil does weird small bluffs, so
Yes.
it is in his range to do that. The next question is, what else does Phil have in his range that we can beat as Ike? I don't think he has queen 9 anymore after he calls the turn.
And queen 9 of diamonds. We can beat queen 9 of
Yeah,
diamonds.
but
Exactly.
he might raise the flop with that. He also might raise the flop with king, queen of diamonds.
Yes.
I don't think he has a naked low diamond draw on the turn. He's not getting the right price with that hand.
So he needs to have a gut shot along with it, a combo draw. So it's got to have the 8 of diamonds in there or the 9 of diamonds.
Yeah, and it has to have also not raised the flop. So Usually the flopped combo draws, maybe not usually, but at least a large chunk of the time, those are going to raise. So it has to have become a combo draw on the turn, which leaves us with 6-8 and 6-9 of diamonds, maybe 5-8 and 5-9 of diamonds if Phil's feeling a little frisky today.
Yeah,
you know?
which sometimes he is.
So,
in fairness.
but that's 4 combos. That's not a ton of stuff.
No, even if we want to throw in a little extra weird 9 of diamonds,
Right.
it's still not very much at all when we think of the bluffs that beat us. I think Ike needs to take that new weird Muppet-enhanced voice that he seems to have just for this particular episode of the big game, and if he's going to not throw the hand away, I think he's got to raise, because Phil is capped at 1 pair, it feels like.
It does feel like that.
And Phil has some bluffs too, which sometimes we're losing to, so we can blow him off all the bluffs that are beating us, and probably, if not all the 1 pairs, almost all the 1 pair
I mean, it's a
hands.
horrible spot for Phil with ace-jack if Ike makes it 55K here, right?
horrible-
Ike's telling a reasonable story. He's saying, I flopped a set, I'm betting big to get max value. Once the river comes, I think you have plenty of draws you're going to bet. I think checking is better for me overall, and I'm going to check raise.
Yeah, I mean, it looks super, super strong.
Yeah.
Phil does not love his life with queens either in this spot.
Yeah.
If he somehow has queens, which he can have at least. I think that's the play if you're not going to just throw it away.
Ultimately, I think Ike doesn't think Phil is betting 1 pair hands on the river, and that's why he ends up calling.
Exactly.
Because he thinks there isn't any value there that's really possible the way Phil played the hand. Turns out he's wrong. But in his mind, that makes it okay to call because Phil either has a slow-played monster or he has something that's a complete whiff like the 6-8 of diamonds. So calling is better than raising in Ike's mind. However, he ranged Phil wrong.
Yeah.
So that's a problem.
It's understandable to think why Phil would not have a slow-played monster and
Yeah.
why you could call here for that reason, but Phil got real value.
It would feel a lot better if we had ace-queen or something. You know, we could at least beat the ace-height diamond draws there. You know, that would be better.
All right, so we thought that was a very interesting played hand. Ike decides to overbet the flop, bets pot on the turn, and then all the crazy river decisions. What do you think? Do you agree with these plays by Ike and Phil? Do you disagree? What do you think about the river plays specifically by both players?
Yeah.
So we kind of didn't like either one too much. Let us know in the comments. We'll respond to our favorite ones right up here. And you know what? If there's nothing to click on, it's definitely coming soon.
I think Ike probably played a little bit more interestingly than Phil in that hand, but
Yeah.
Phil is often the guy who's playing weird and interesting, and that's why we've done plenty of Phil Hellmuth breakdowns. Click right up there to check that out.
Also, pouting, crying,
Yeah. Oh, those are
whining,
great, yeah.
Yelling, name calling.
All that stuff,
All
yeah.
the good stuff for sure. Also, check out our podcast. We went into 53 minutes of detail about this hand, coming up with ranges, trying to decide, is it okay for Phil to bet this river? Is it okay for Ike to call?
Yeah.
Can we justify a call? That's where we decided, oh, wow, I could raise here, and this is why, the whole capping thing. You can hear that process happen. Hear us do lots of thought experiments, lots of cool stuff. It's the breakdown presented by the Poker Guys. And of course, if you like this video, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel.